Welcome to the Home Building Hub, your essential podcast guide to building your new home. Hosted by industry experts Colin Bischoff and Darren Brennan, this conversational podcast will help better educate you about all things new home building so you can avoid costly mistakes and enjoy your building experience to the fullest, no matter which home builder you choose.
Hey there, folks. Welcome to the Home Building Hub. You're with Colin and co-host Darren Brennan as always. And today, Dazza, cracking the code, we're going to talk a little bit about 5 confusing building contract terms and help explain them. We're going to go through things like provisional sums, talk about payment schedules and all that sort of stuff, because this is a question that comes across a fair bit and it's something that does confuse people. It's a little overwhelming, Dazza, when a contract is presented. It's not 1 or 2 pages. It's definitely got some substance to it. So it's important you know what it is you're signing.
For sure, mate. And we should always lead with we are just giving some general advice, and this is not legal advice. So if you're seeking actual legal advice, please go and talk to a lawyer, because we are not one of those, unfortunately. However, I think it's a really cool topic, and it's something that does come up all the time, Colin. That we, get asked these questions from people as they are, about to sign their contract. So I'm happy to crack straight in, mate, and run straight through them. But I think people should get some really good value out of today's
You sounded
episode.
like, on the politician ads, this ad is approved by Darren Brennan of the Home Building Hub. Yep, this is... Yeah.
But I did that nicely.
We haven't had anyone come at us, I don't think, have we, for finance advice or something? Not yet. No. Something to look forward to.
It is general in its nature, and just to be sure, in case someone decides that we want to hold you for that, please seek legal advice if that's what you're looking for. So otherwise, we'll give you some pretty good general advice, and I reckon we'll be pretty close to the money, mate. So, yeah.
It wouldn't be like people today to blame someone else instead of take responsibility, would it? I don't think that'd happen, Darren. Not to 2 lovely, polite chaps like us, no.
Exactly.
Let's roll.
Mate, I'm going to chat about prime costs and provisional sums. So prime costs is one that people generally, if they're signing with a major volume builder, don't come across a lot. But they're basically allowances for items not yet selected. So, and what it means there is that builder doesn't have a set of standard inclusions, for example. So you may not have picked taps and tiles and things like that already. So they'll put in a prime cost, a dollar value amount for you to do so. And you might go off and pick them at Bunnings or pick them at a tap store or whatever that looks like, and then have those added into your contract. So that's what prime costs are. Again, if you're dealing with a volume builder, it's unlikely you're going to see prime costs in your building contract at all. It'll talk about them and people go, well, why is it in there? The reason it's in the contract is this is the HIA contract, certainly, and the master builders contracts are a broad contract to cover many different situations. So they're not granular back to just your home. They're broadly set up to cover, a whole lot of different circumstances of homes, and people build in different ways. So that's prime cost for you. Provisional sums, however, do pop up at times. And again, most volume builders will try not to have provisional sums in their contract, but they may. Again, and that's because, so they are estimated costs for works not yet defined. And what they mean by not yet defined is they don't have enough information yet. So, for example, it could be a excavation, and often you'll see that on knock-down rebuild sites where they may not have a soil test and a survey done yet, or the house is still in the way, so they've got a pretty good guide to what that's going to look like. However, they're unsure exactly what that is going to be. So why do builders include them? It could be that they're obviously unable to estimate that cost directly, so put a real cost to that. A great example for that would be rock. So they may not be aware of how much rock is in the ground, so the builder may include a provisional sum for, say, $10,000, as they aren't aware how much rock's under the ground, right? That being said, the builder must provide you with receipts for that work, and they are allowed to apply a margin to that. The provisional sum, though, must not be more than 20% greater than the amount stated. So they can't come in and put $10,000 in there and then end up charging you $30,000, right? They can only allow a 20% buffer. So at $10,000, the most they could charge is 12, right? So you've got some legal protection there. As the builder, they've got to be somewhat levels of expert. So if they're putting a provisional sum, they can put in $100,000, but then you're not going to sign it because you're going to say, hold on, I don't have to spare $100,000. Well, how does that sit? So it's got to be a fair and reasonable sum of money, and then they have to be at least close to the target on that, so within 20%. If it comes in less, great. There may not be any rocks, so there may be no charge at all, right? And therefore, you're in a winning position, but you need to be mindful of that additional cost if they are in there when you're borrowing money. So obviously, the risk for the homeowner is the cost could blow out. And I guess how best to manage that is, where possible, you want those items to be fixed priced in your contract, right? So what you can get is that, and Keith Ryan spoke on our podcast previously about contracts, and understand that that HIA contract is not a fixed price contract. It has variables in there, such as liquidated damages that he'd spoken about previously, which again I found quite interesting. So if you want to hear that episode, look back through our previous episodes, and you'll be able to get some information on that. But try and get, where possible, those single items to be fixed. So if it is rock, are you feeling more comfortable if you knew they'd fixed it at $5,000 or a provisional sum at 10, and you don't know where it's going to sit? So that might be one way to look at it. Get realistic estimates. So make sure that their estimate is genuinely realistic. They should be able to provide you some information on that, and try and avoid provisional sums and prime costs where possible in your contract. That's number one, Cole.
Yeah, and as you said, just reinforcing, most of the time in a greenfield estate, you won't see a provisional sum or a prime cost, because they generally fix as much as they can. Might be complex unit sites where they don't know, I guess, what's required yet, e.g. like a water retention system, stuff that they don't know, or they know there's going to be one needed, but is it going to cost this or is it going to cost that? So some of those things are guesstimates at the time of quoting, aren't they? So we sort of refer to those. That's the point of those two items. The next one for me is payment schedules. Now, again, we're referring to the HIA, I guess, schedules and methods. But basically what this is there's, when you build a house, the contractor will have basically a table that outlines, well, this is how much you have to pay at each of these stages. So the deposit stage, the base, the frame, the lockup, the fix, and the final. So it sort of breaks it down for you out of your total contract price, and then gives you the percentages of what's going to be due at those stages through your lender, or if you're paying cash, for example. So essentially, these are made in arrears. So the work is completed, you then get given the invoice, and then you flick it off to the bank, and then they pay the builder, and then you start paying your loan amount on that increased amount that you're now or have been lent, if that makes sense. So there are different methods. There's usually a couple in there. So I guess I'm referencing HIA Victoria. Most common is probably Schedule 1, Darren, in the retail world, and but some will use Schedule 2. And they just have different percentages, is probably the easiest way to put it. Like, there's different amounts paid at different stages. Probably not a huge difference to you. Like, they can't just go, I'm going to claim 100% of the bill at base stage. It doesn't work like that, but they might increase a little bit more up front and take a little bit less down the track, etc. It's not, as I said, it's not a massive deal to your repayments. Like, yes, you might pay a little bit more at base or frame and things like that. But most commonly, you'll see builders using the same one, I guess, and banks are used to seeing the same one. And that's generally the two options you've got. The misunderstanding we see is that some think it's monthly payments, but it's not the case. It's really tied to, once you hit base, you'll get an invoice for base for the percentage that's in the contract table that we've just mentioned. And the risk is really cash flow, timing, and bank delays. One of the tips I'll give you is, when you get that invoice of that completed stage, it's really important that you don't just hang on to it for a few days or a week or two, because sometimes the bank, depends on who you're using, Darren, but I find some banks are really easy to deal with, and you flick, basically they've all got an email you send your stage, I guess, invoices to, and then they come back, some of them come back, yep, done, it's paid, like within a day or two. someone come back and say, "Oh no, you need to change you need to put a little dot there on the I, or you need to put an address here." And I had one that I built, Darren, and it was through, I think, Macquarie, that particular one, and they would make me put my building address at the top and in the middle of the invoice, and at the bottom as the delivery postal address, which technically is not correct, because I was living in a different address whilst building a house, obviously. So, but they refused to make a payment unless I had those three separate addresses listed and the planner sub number and all this crap. And I was just like, wow, it was quite. So you will come across banks like that. The point is, get the invoice, go straight to the bank, get it done, because you want your builder to keep charging forward. You want to be building credibility that you're paying these things quickly and on time, as particularly in the last step when you're about to get towards the handover. You want to make sure that you get that off straight away. Otherwise, sometimes you will have a handover and you won't be given your keys until the bank settles and that money's in the builder's account. So that can happen as well. The last tip we'll give just on that schedules, Daz, is double check the schedule because against your lender's requirements. Some lenders are very strict on what they will and will not accept. So you want to just say through your broker or direct to your bank, here is the contract, here's the schedule they're proposing, just make sure you're happy with it, please confirm. That's pretty important. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I think also make sure when you're talking, if you're a permanent resident or you're on a special visa or you're applying for the first home buyers grant, as in the new, which was obviously previously there, but it's been expanded, the 5% deposit scheme, make sure you have a chat to your bank first and maybe even request from your builder a copy of a blank contract so you can understand which one they're going to be selecting. Because I have seen a couple of them, Cole, where people have had to get their contract reissued because it's had Schedule 2 instead of Schedule 1, and the bank won't accept a variation in that case. So they've had to reissue the actual building contract, which is really quite unusual not to just have them accept a variation to get that changed. So that can be painful, take a little bit of time, and become a little bit stressful for yourself being the homeowner if that's the case. So, just find out that information, particularly if you're one of those, like I say, if you're a first home buyer applying for the 5% deposit scheme, or you're, on a PR and there's certain lending conditions around what you're doing, just ask the question, talk with your broker and find out. And if that's the case, get it amended before you sign the contract, before they issue the contract. Say, look, here's from my lender. They're not going to accept that. They're going to accept Schedule 2. So you can, ask those questions. Or Schedule 2 might also say percentage of works, or at certain stages, for example, it might say that assumed lockup or 30% of works, right? Or whatever that might look like in the contract. Just, again, ask those questions so that you're covered early. So, yeah, it's one of the trickier ones, I guess, that little bit.
Yeah, it is. And there's more to it, but we try not to overcomplicate things. We're trying to appeal to the masses, I guess, in what we're presenting here. We understand there's more things that we could talk about with schedules and whatnot. But as we said, trying to appeal to the masses so most of you get a general understanding of what to look out for.
For sure. Number 3, Cole, special conditions. So a lot of builders will insert special conditions into the contracts, and these are custom clauses added to the standard contract, right? The common issues that they sort of address may be things like sunset clauses, land settlement dates, finance clauses, how they present a start date and a completion date, what they look like, items like that. So have a read through them. It could be things like how rocks are dressed, so they might be including rock up to a certain level in the contract, what that looks like, et cetera, et cetera. So read through those. They're certainly worth understanding. They're often overlooked by people, and the reason why is because they're often in, I guess almost small print, but they're also often got a fair bit of legal jargon in there. So the joy these days too with legal jargon is if you've got any of the AI, you can certainly pick them up, bang it into AI and say, tell me about this in layman's terms, what it actually means, and it'll give you information back on those legal terms. So that can really help you out in that. The other tip is get legal advice or speak to a building consultant if you want more information on these items to understand them. So they can always help you out. If you're wanting to go down the path of getting a lawyer to review your contract, by all means, you're entitled to do so. But understand that most builders won't change many of the terms and conditions that are in their contract, even if the lawyer's asking for that. And they are in place. They're set up by the HIA or the master builders, these contracts, and they're generally there to support both parties. So, be really comfortable in the fact that, there's thousands and thousands of these contracts signed every year. So
I only laugh, Darren, because in the investment world, these are people who are buying investments, not really emotionally attached. They get a contract, they flick it straight to a legal person. They come back with a whole bunch of questions and saying, you need to remove this, this, and this, and this. And the answer we always send back is 2 letters. And it's very simple because it's NO. We don't change the contract because that's the contract that the industry body gives us. The variation to that, there are some things that can change. Special conditions, like you said, is often overlooked, but that is, I would say, arguably the most important part of the contract, because that's the custom special conditions that the builder has put in there over and above or separate to the contract that is really a default template contract that everyone's using. Okay, so please be sure to read those. And like you said, Daz, it's a good idea. Pop the whole contract PDF into ChatGPT or whatever. So give me a summary and then do a specific special conditions one as well. You can copy paste that section in, say explain what this means and what the implication is. It's very unlikely a builder will change in these conditions because they're in there for a reason. They have no intention of burning you, but they are in there to protect the builder. The HIA component or master builders is there to protect both builder and client to make sure that it's not just a completely one-way traffic type contract. Okay, so special conditions super important, Daz, for sure.
Yeah, indeed.
Build
for number 4.
Build timeframes is the next one. It's something that I think people just don't quite understand. So there will be a number of building days written in your contract. So usually it might be a particular number, say 220 days, for example. And on top of that, there'll be some extra days that can, I suppose, be applied for things like, and those days I should say might be only business days. They won't include weekends, public holidays, Christmas shutdown, or days lost to extensions of time for weather, inclement weather and variations or delays from the owner. So there are reasons for the days to be longer. But the long story short is there's a set of days that the builder's committing to you that they will build the house in. You got to check things like, well, when does that start and when does that finish? Does it start from when I signed the contract? No, it doesn't. Does it start from when you got a permit? No, it doesn't. Usually starts from sometimes when the slab is down. Darren, is what a lot of people are doing. So technically they've already started, haven't they? Is it when the temp fence goes up, like the site scrape begins? So get that answer when you're sort of reviewing those timeframes, and you can just basically, I do think people spend a bit too much time on the arguing the day thing and the penalties, what we call liquidated damages, because the builder's not really going to put a time frame in they don't think they can achieve. However, a few years back, we certainly had delays that went well above and beyond those timeframes. So liquidated damages most certainly come into play, or extensions of time were issued because it was something that was not covered in the bonus days, I suppose. I guess, there's those phrases in contracts like these, like acts of God and things like that, but they're not that common. So let's talk about the normal stuff. So you should expect single stories somewhere between all inclusive 260 to 290 days will be in there, which gives you plenty of time for the house to be built. The builder's confident they can build it in that time. However, for whatever reason, if they go over the number of days, you are entitled to a fee. It's called liquidated damages, where the builder will pay you each week a fee, usually $250 per week, because they're the ones that have delayed it. Okay. Now, there will be lots of reasons for the delay, and you want to make sure that you're not the reason. That's quite common. If you have a private inspector wanting to go through every single stage, on top of the day amount in the contract, you might be adding 21 days for each of those inspections, which we have talked about before. But you have to understand By the time A, the appointment gets put in place, B, it actually happens, C, the report comes out, D, the report is reviewed, E, the report items are rectified, and that's easily 3 weeks gone in some cases. So your 220 plus all the other stuff now is 260. Now you've just added, for one simple inspection, another 21 days to that, etc. So be mindful and understanding of that. Really important. It's probably not one you're going to be able to negotiate. We're just telling you this is, I get a sense of, so you understand it, what liquidated damages are. So just check your timeline, work with your builder, ask the questions and say, what does this mean? What does that mean? Get a really good understanding is probably the point. Anything else to add there, Daz?
I just think the one trip up too people have is, pad out your times a bit, just so that you're aware, particularly at the tail end of the job, because, you start thinking, gee, I'm going to move out of my rental property and I'm going to move into this new place. And then you give notice and the house isn't ready on time. Give yourself a bit of an overlap on that if you can, and you can afford to, because otherwise, the number of times I've heard people scrambling and they're out of home for 3 days. So they've had to put stuff into some kind of storage out of their home while they're waiting for the new home to hand over because there's been a slight delay or something's happened. And that's still within those build timeframes. The builder's entitled to take that time up to make sure that things are right. So just don't go and give up your rental too early. Just be really having an open conversation with your builder to make sure you're not in that position.
Yeah, good point. It's quite common, isn't it? So yeah, it's
all the
tricky.
time.
Depends what side of the fence you're on. It's really hard for a builder to give you a final day.
Yeah.
Because still, right at that last piece, like an appliance delivery may be delayed
Yeah.
that you just wouldn't have thought would happen. Or, if you're doing landscaping and they need to put the grass in, which is generally the last step, it rains for a week.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. Or, or the opposite. In the middle of summer, you don't want to put grass down too early because it's dead by the time the handover comes in play. There's lots of these factors that builders are juggling. They've got a lot of balls in the air. So I know as a client, you want to know, hey, tell me when I can move in so I can give my notice for rent, or tell my, mother and father-in-law when we're finally moving out of that house that they've been putting us up for a few months. There's some challenges and it's really stressful, but it's difficult to give a specific, this is the day, until you're getting really close to it. So work with your builder, you try and work out a bit of a ballpark together as best you can. It's probably the only path, isn't it, Darren?
Absolutely. No, great, mate. And then number 5 is utility connection costs. So what we're talking about here is things like your power, gas, water, NBN, etc. So the common misconception is thinking that all those connections are included, right? And so that's, and we're talking about connection fees here. That's not the case. So they're usually put back on you. So often, depending on the builder you're dealing with, and most builders seem to have headed this way now, is that any electricity and water use throughout the construction is on you to pay. And it's not a massive bill, but you're going to end up having to pay for the usage during the construction as well. So most builders are doing it that way. Often excluded or only included to the pit at the front. So again, if you need power from over the road, then often you'll need to arrange a power pit yourself. And again, people are unaware of that. So depending on your site, if it's a brand new greenfield site, so one of the estates, generally the power pit's right at the front. But if you're building a knockdown rebuild or in a rural area, you may need to find out where is the electricity and how do I connect to that. So all utilities, I guess, are the same in that respect too. So you need to understand what you've got to connect to, where they are, speak to your builder about it, find out what are the real costs, so you don't get any surprises down the track. So again, if the builder allows on a traditional size block, say under 500 square meters, a 4 to 6 meter setback, say, you're now on a much bigger lot and you're going to have a 20 meter setback, well, then there's going to be extra cost to run those electricity, gas, etc. in. So be aware of that. Yeah, and certainly the problematic ones are the knockdown rebuild and rural blocks. So, they're the ones to be thinking about. It can cost you thousands of dollars extra to run those if you're running those things quite a distance. So, again, ask questions on that. The builder does not include your account setup costs. This is up to you. So any of those account setup costs, and a lot of the companies will charge that a $300 fee to set up your account. For example, they will charge that to you directly because you're going to be the person holding that account. I guess the tip is ask for a full breakdown of site works and connection allowances when you're working with your builder. So, and you understand what the costs are.
I'd add to that, Darren, that there should be a table in the contract that says here's the stuff that we're not including.
Correct.
And there's usually a forecasted figure. So gas connection, that's one that's gone up, as we know, and as we've shared before. I actually copped one of those bills recently, Darren, the connection fee for gas for an investment that we built. And then I got the bill and I fell off my chair and got myself back up again. And there it was, $2,000 and something just to connect. That's not included in your build contract, and it's clearly written in there. So yeah, just be mindful, and you've got a budget for this stuff. Okay, so if you're paying for power and electricity, power or things through the build, water and power, it's generally not going to be too much. But if you see the neighbouring builder tapping into your power, go over there and pull the cord out and tell them to use someone else's. I've actually, on this build I'm talking about, I've had to do that. The trades just tap into your power. I'm like, I'm paying for this, mate, so you can piss off. Like, no, you can't use my power.
Give us a 50 or bugger off, mate.
Yep. That's it. So just be mindful of that, but it's really not. It's not going to break the bank. But yeah, getting a $2,000 bill that you forgot about or didn't expect, that's pretty hurtful for a lot of people who are still trying to work out how am I going to put blinds on or get the landscaping done and pay for the furniture and stuff like that. Okay, so
for sure.
Look in the contract. There'll be a table there, and ask your building consultant a little bit more. What are the things that I've got to pay for?
Yep.
Very good, Dazza. Well, they're the top 5, everyone. So hopefully that helps. Just to sort of wrap up, the prime cost, provisional sums, not as common in our greenfield estates, but something to look out for and understand. Payment schedules, methods, you've got to make sure you're understanding what that is and that your bank is all good with the one that the builder has provided. Special conditions, grab those, make sure you understand them, read them 3, 4, and 5 times just so you get it. They're generally not too long. They're not 55 pages. They're just probably 2 or 3 sometimes. Time frames, make sure you're across that. The building days and what you get in terms of liquidated damages. Sometimes they refer to them LDs. And as we said, utility connection costs, understand what is being paid for, covered versus what is not. Pretty clear.
There we go, mate. Excellent.
Cool. Well, everyone, thanks for listening, and those watching, same to you. As always, any topic ideas, just jump on the website, homebuildinghub.com.au, and we love anyone who can jump on, leave us a 5-star review on whatever platform you're on. That helps promote the podcast. And other than that, we look forward to seeing you guys on the next one.
Thanks for listening to the podcast, guys. And just our disclaimer, whilst we're all about providing value to you, this podcast should not be considered as legal or financial advice. It contains general information only, and you should seek out independent professional advice on your personal situation before making any legal or financial decisions.
1